HTC Vive is already very capably showing off what premium VR experience can look like, despite the landscape still being in its infancy. In fact, it's so far ahead of what much of the competition is offering that it can be difficult to describe the experience of using it to someone who hasn't yet tried VR themselves. It's akin to trying to describe moving footage to someone who's spent their whole life staring at pictures, or describing a game to someone who's only ever watched films. At times it can even be difficult describing the Vive to someone who's only ever used cheaper mobile VR hardware like the Gear VR, Google Daydream View or Google Cardboard. But the highest compliment we can give to the HTC Vive is just how right it immediately feels, and how easily all your reservations about VR fall away as soon as you start using it, even if you've been a VR naysayer up until now. Virtual reality is a still nascent medium and, to that end, has some of the problems all new mediums face when they first start out. The naysayers will claim that there isn't a great library of games out yet, technically not a true statement, but one we hear all the time nonetheless. They'll say that it's too expensive and the hardware just isn't that good yet, but while it's a somewhat pricey setup, the experience you'll get on the HTC Vive is unrivaled. It's light years ahead of Google Cardboard and Samsung Gear VR, miles ahead of PlayStation VR and, until very recently, the Oculus Rift, too. And, as it turns out, we're not the only ones who think so, developers agree. A 2016 study on Gamasutra reported that 49% of the companies they surveyed were currently developing games for the Vive, while only about 43% said they were working on a game for Oculus Rift. When paired with the proper hardware, a PC with an Intel Core i5-4590K and either a Nvidia GTX 970 or AMD R9 390 GPU, the HTC Vive is an incredible gateway into a new medium, one that is currently dominated by short demos in the growing library of games, but should one day play host to full-length films, television shows and contemporary art. The positives, in condensed form, include, 1-to-1 movement tracking, a perfectly natural 110-degree field of view, there's nary a screen tear or dropped frame when you're using the right equipment, movement feels natural, it has best-in-class controllers, and the experiences, the demos in the games available through Steam VR, simply blow the competitors away. But before we tackle games, let's address what had been up until very recently the elephant in the room, price. The HTC Vive wasn't cheap at launch or for a long time after, but, on March 19, it got just a shade less expensive. As of now, the system, which includes the headset, the controllers, earbuds and the base stations themselves, sells for $499, £499, about $615 and that's before you buy a computer with the recommended specs. The Vive now costs just $100 more than Oculus Rift, putting it within striking distance as far as price. Ultimately, the question now is whether you'll find that it's worth the extra cash for a better experience, even though it's not as much cash as it once was. That's a fair discussion to have, albeit one that we can do almost nothing about right now. New hardware, especially at the cutting edge of a nascent industry, is going to be expensive. But wait, why is it more expensive? What exactly does it do? How does the HTC Vive work? The first time we got our hands on the HTC Vive was at Mobile World Congress 2015, where HTC first made the announcement of its partnership with Valve, and it has been retooled and vastly improved since that original showing. The consumer version works wonderfully, is vastly easier to set up and feels ready to be shipped to the public, which, considering that units are supposed to go out any day now, is a very good thing. Like other virtual reality headsets, the Vive has the arduous task of completely immersing you in a video game by producing two images simultaneously. However, unlike PlayStation VR and Oculus Rift that use a single camera to track your head and extremities, HTC Vive has two base stations, which sit on the wall attached to the included wall mounts or a high shelf and help map track your movements as you walk around in the 3D world.